You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
We're always looking for, the adversary's view of software supply chains, and we're seeing Kubernetes as a particularly interesting threat surface that people like to take advantage of.
That's Scott Fanning. He's Senior Director of Product Management and Cloud Security at CrowdStrike. We're discussing their research on the first ever Dero cryptojacking operation targeting Kubernetes infrastructure. For folks who aren't working in Kubernetes day to day, can you give us some insights as to what makes it attractive for these sorts of threat actors?
Sure. Think of Kubernetes as a orchestration plane for containers. They allow a container, which is part of an application, to be scaled across the cloud. And if the needs of your application increase, it's smart enough to add more capability, more compute, more parts of the app. And then if it requires to go down, it reduces, it constricts, it keeps costs down. And so Kubernetes' job is to orchestrate the scaling of applications. And what makes it attractive is that it's kind of the control hub of all these different applications. And if you can get into that, you can start dictating what kind of applications you may want to install, as well as maybe how they behave.
Well, let's dig in here with this campaign that's targeting Dero. That's a type of cryptocurrency, yes?
Yes, it's an interesting cryptocurrency. It's competing against Monero as well. It's more efficient, so you can generate coin for less power, less time. So it makes it more attractive. The cryptocurrency market has taken a bit of a dive of late. So any kind of efficiencies you can get is seen as better return on investment. And so Dero is seen as a nice way to monetize, being energy efficient and time efficient as well.
I see. Well, let's walk through this campaign together then. How does an organization find themselves falling victim to this?
So this usually starts off with a very basic premise of having unauthenticated APIs to your Kubernetes cluster. By default now, when you deploy Kubernetes, you have to put in authentication. But that's a recent advancement. So there are many Kubernetes clusters out there that are open to be used from the outside. And what the adversary does is look for those Kubernetes clusters. And once it finds one, it decides to take advantage of it.
And how does it do that? What exactly is it doing here?
So what it'll do is that it will first I do a reconnaissance to find which ports are open on the Kubernetes cluster. It's misconfigured, and then what it'll do is that it will ask it to deploy what's called a pod on a node, leveraging the Kubernetes cluster. This pod is just a small application, and what's novel about this is it uses common DevOps and Kubernetes terms to kind of masquerade itself. So if you're looking really quickly at the directory of processes that are running in your application, you might not see it. But because it kind of masquerades itself as a common term, it's very easy. And so it uses the word proxy API, which sounds very DevOpsy, and everyone uses a proxy. So it kind of masquerades itself and then deploys using DevOps techniques a crypto miner. But mine's Dero.
Would someone who's running this Kubernetes instance be likely to detect this, or would they see a sudden spike in their usage?
So it's interesting is that it does a very clever job, like I said, using kind of leveraging terms. Like there is a default kind of binary in a Kubernetes cluster called pause, and it's kind of empty by default. And actually, the adversary takes advantage of that and calls their miner pause. So it looks just like you would normally. And then you won't see as much on the CPU front because it's kind of masqueraded inside the Kubernetes cluster as a pod. And it's very efficient. So it doesn't really make as much noise either. So you have to kind of understand kind of what you're looking for. In a quick glance, you might not see it, but if you have, the ability to monitor from a threat perspective with some technology, then you can see it, and Falcon Cloud Security can see it. So that's why we have an actual detection for it. You can actually see the capabilities.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you pointed out in your research here was that evidently there are some competing campaigns here. There's a Monero campaign that's also trying to come at this the same way.
Yeah, I mean, everyone looks for the best real estate, and they don't have a problem sticking it to their friends either. So, and those CPU cycles are precious. So anything they can do to get rid of a competitor and give themselves more breathing room to do what they have to do, the adversary has no shame in doing it.
So this Monero campaign, they will come in using the same sorts of methods, and if they see the Dero campaign, they boot them out and install their own stuff?
Yes, and they'll do it rudely. they'll just wipe it out, and they'll the Monero campaign will infect the host OS, so they'll go even a level deeper. So it's a little noisier, but needless to say, they want as much real estate for themselves to do their job.
Right. No honor among thieves.
None.
Well, let's talk about ways to stop this. I mean, how do organizations best protect themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, one thing you need to do is just make sure that your APIs to your Kubernetes cluster have authentication turned on. Very, very basic thing. It tends not to be on the default because it adds friction. Managing authentication in Kubernetes can be a little tricky. So the incentives to do it sometimes can be low, but that's a very basic thing to do, but it certainly keeps them out if you do a good job of it. That's the primary way to keep them out. The second thing is just make sure you have a good security monitoring system in place. If you have something that has a Kubernetes protection capability, so you can monitor what's happening with your Kubernetes control plane, as well as what's happening with your pods and your clusters, then that's definitely another way to do it. Keeping ever vigilant is always helpful, and of course, least privilege principles. That's common against any. Make sure that people have the need to know and the right to use, and keep those privileges down.
Is that a matter of looking at behavioral things? You were saying, keeping an eye on these, just looking for activity that is outside of the band of what is expected?
Yeah, I mean, if you can see, it's a combination of understanding how the process trees within the application are formed, but it's also the combination of those processes and how they're invoked, and that's where having the ability to not just monitor the activity of your Kubernetes environment, but also being able to create detections around what combinations of these processes, when sewed together, represent an indicator of an attack, and that's kind of where CrowdStrike comes in.
Do you all have any idea who might be behind this or what part of the world they're coming from?
It's pretty novel. Attribution's always a little tricky in these cases, especially with this particular type of Bitcoin technology. Unlike Monero, which uses your standard, kind of wallets and proxies, this uses like a community wallet. Very difficult to trace. So it's one of the reasons why cyber criminals particularly enjoy its merits.
Our thanks to Scott Fanning from CrowdStrike for joining us. The research looks into the first ever Dero cryptojacking operation targeting Kubernetes infrastructure. We'll have a link in the show notes. And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security. Because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. The CyberWire Research Saturday podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Elliot Peltzman. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.